GWM's Ora brand lives on, now with the 5 HEV. Now, the Ora nameplate is not an unfamiliar one for many Malaysians because ultimately GWM relaunched in Malaysia with the Ora brand first, coming in first with the Ora Good Cat before then expanding into the Ora 07. However, as a result of certain market requirements, those cars are now no longer available, with the Good Cat being or selling out at least until stocks last, and the 07 completely being delisted from the GWM Malaysia website. And so in their place, the Ora nameplate continues with the 5 HEV, which marks a departure for Ora because now this is not an all-electric vehicle, but rather it's a hybrid. According to GWM, they describe this hybrid technology as Hi-2, which means hybrid intelligent 2 or hybrid intelligent two-wheel drive, which this car is. Now, because this car utilizes a 1.5-liter engine up front, which powers a 1.09 kilowatt-hour battery, that gives this car the ability to travel up to 1,100 kilometers on a single tank of fuel, which has already been proven by a Guinness World Record certification in China, where this car did over 1,100 kilometers on a single charge with a claimed consumption average of 4.4 liters to the 100. Now, this does not come in any compromise in terms of performance because the Ora 5 offers no less than 223 PS and 476 Newton meters of torque, able to rocket this car from rest to 100 kilometers an hour in just 7.7 seconds, which is not bad for what is ultimately being built as an urban family crossover. Now, while the Ora 5 might look like a hybrid version of the Ora Good Cat that we're quite familiar with, in reality, this is a significantly larger car. And that's because its overall length is almost 4.5 meters long, while its height is about 1.8 meters tall, making this car longer and a little bit taller compared to the BEV hatchback that we're all very familiar with. That said, however, the design language remains very familiar, which is why up front we get these circular headlights replete with these two little daytime running light signatures there, as well as a small opening down here in order to help cool the powertrain. You also get air inlets here down the side in order to improve this car's aerodynamics, but for the most part, this fascia remains very familiar. Moving down the side, this is where you can really tell that the Ora 5 has gotten a little bit bigger, and therefore it is larger than the Ora Good Cat that we're all very familiar with. Now, in terms of rolling stock, this car rides on a set of dual-tone alloy wheels, which look like they've got covers on them, but these are actual alloys with a diamond cut finish to the front. Rolling stock, however, is settled by a set of Prinks tires. Now, according to GWM Malaysia, the tires that are currently fitted to this car are not necessarily reflective of what will later come to market, because this is not yet a finalized specification, and so we hope that there will be some changes before this car comes to market. But again, it is from this angle where you can really tell that this is a larger car. At almost 4.5 meters long, this car will ultimately compete with vehicles like the Proton EMA 7 PHEV, as well as the BYD Atto 3, among many other NEV, non-NEV vehicles out there within this space, all vying for a slice of the family SUV pie, which is why it rides quite high. As you can see, it's got a pretty decent amount of ground clearance, and you do have functional roof rails up here should you want to fit a roof box. That said, however, when we get to the back end, that's where the Ora 5 looks very, very familiar, because ultimately the design language back here is identical to what we've seen before from the Ora Good Cat, replete with its light bar all the way up here, which also doubles up as its brake lights, whereas the reverse lights and indicators live down here on the bumper. But this should be your clearest indicator that this is not a Good Cat. That and the fact that it's bigger. Now, the fact that it is bigger does mean that when you open the tailgate, there is a pretty decent amount of space. The Ora Good Cat was not particularly known for being the most practical vehicle in the world, but at least the Ora 5 has a much deeper boot area, which means that you can load luggage in here a little bit more easily. And if you fold the rear seats flat, which fold 60-40, you get a completely flat load bay, which is certainly nice to see. Now, you might think that this is not a lot of clearance, because it's not. So thankfully, this boot is deep because it's not very tall. And the reason why it's not very tall is because underneath this boot floor, you will find a space saver spare wheel, which means that this boot floor cannot be lowered. This is basically it. And so if you have cabin size bags, be prepared to either put them on their side or put them on the front. Not the most practical space in the world, but again, for younger families, etc., if you want to move house and whatever, you can just fold the rear seats flat in order to accommodate even more stuff. But for the most part, I think that this boot space is adequate. Not great, but adequate. And if you want more space than this, maybe look at a Toyota Yaris Cross. Now, the interior of the Ora 5 is a much nicer place to be compared to that of the Good Cat, primarily because of this interior design, which has been significantly reworked compared to what we've seen before from the BEV. So, for example, while elements like these toggle switches down here remain, everything else has been reworked, such as, for example, the material quality all the way around the front of the dash is all nice and soft. Even down here is a pretty forgiving kind of plastic. The door cards are also very pleasant to hold, and you even get a sort of pseudo KEF audio style speaker grill here, although obviously it's not KEF audio. Now, all of this is powered by a couple of screens. The central screen here is an incredibly high resolution screen, and in terms of its usability and functionality, it does seem to be pretty snappy and pretty responsive. Most importantly, to me at least, is the fact that this screen already has a coating applied to it, which should minimize the incidence of oily sort of signs and shit on the screen, which is always nice to see. Now, being a central touchscreen, naturally there are a bunch of different things you can do with this, and naturally it does offer things like Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and this is also where you control the majority of this car's functions. The Ora 5 runs the very latest Coffee OS system from GWM, which means that this overall user interface has been significantly reworked in order to function a little bit better and to be a little bit more visually interesting and a little bit easier to use without having to take your eyes off the road for too long, which is great because it's a massive screen. Now, aside from this, you also get a digital instrument cluster, which is again much nicer and larger than what we got from the Ora Good Cat, which should give you all the information that you need at a glance without having to strain too much. More importantly, because it utilizes the same steering wheel design as the GWM Way G9, it means that in order to manipulate that screen, it is relatively easy, if I can figure out the buttons, here we go, which allow you to manipulate and change various functions on the screen. That's changed my drive mode. Actually, never mind. I have no idea how this works. I've only just gotten into this car, so we're discovering this together. Now, beyond all this, in terms of practical amenities, you have a couple of cup holders here, a Qi wireless charger, as well as a phone holder cubby here, which is always nice to see. We also get a full-size panoramic sunroof, which does come with a sunshade, if I can figure out how to. There's no button here, which also has the ability to close, if I can find the thing, which is in here somewhere. I'm pretty sure it's a setting. Yeah, here we go, sunshade. Which means that much like the Proton X50, or was it the EMA 7? The EMA 7 BEV, it means that you have to manipulate a thing on the screen in order to close the sunshade, which I find to be very irritating. Now, beyond that, there are decently sized door bins, big enough for a litre-sized bottle. There is a glove box here, which opens with a nice soft damped effect, although there is no sort of flocked material in here to minimize the sound of things rattling about. But overall, I think that this is not that bad. These two front seats are also ventilated and power adjustable. You get ambient lighting, and overall, it does seem pretty appealing for a new family car within this space, although at the time of filming, we are not aware of what pricing looks like. The interior of the Ora 5 is actually not that bad, but the front seats are in my driving position, about 170 centimeters. You can see I have a decent amount of knee room and a pretty okay amount of headroom, despite the fact this car comes with a standard fit panoramic sunroof with an electric sun blind. So that doesn't feel all too bad. And I do have plenty of space for my feet, and there is a relatively small and low central transmission tunnel, which means that overall space back here is pretty much okay. The only problem is that because this car is a hybrid, and naturally it's a 1.09 or whatever kilowatt hour battery lives underneath the floor of this car has been raised in order to make way not just for the battery but also the routing for the exhaust as well as the fuel lines, etc., which means that, as you can see, the floor is quite raised, so I don't have that much in terms of under thigh support. However, if there are only two passengers back here, you can stretch your feet out underneath the seat in front of you, which is not so bad. And even if you have a central passenger, because the central tunnel is quite low and flat, it does mean that there is space for everybody's feet, which is certainly nice. There's a USB-C port and a single crotch cooler in the back here. I don't understand the Chinese insistence on that. And most importantly, there is no rear armrest. In terms of overall material quality, it is not quite as nice as it is in the front because we don't have ambient lighting here, but we still at least have this sort of copper colored plastic for not only the speaker grille but also for the door handle, just like it is in the front, which helps to break up the visual monotony of this very grey door card. Now, you do have ISOFIX mounts on the two outer seats, but the door openings on this car are not that big, which means that if you have a bulky rear-facing child seat, it might be a little bit of a challenge to get it in and out of the door. But I imagine that a forward-facing child seat should not be a problem at all, and locating the ISOFIX mounts also shouldn't present too much of a challenge because I can find them quite easily. Now, at the time of filming, we are not fully aware of how many variants of this car are expected to be launched on our market, although we have a pretty good idea that the Ora 5 will be made available in a singular variant, which means that standard features also include a full gamut of active safety features, which should be able to give this car essentially level 2 semi-autonomy. Expect to see things like autonomous emergency braking, adaptive cruise control, lane departure warning, blind spot monitoring, as well as a fantastic 360-degree camera, as we demonstrated earlier. Now, in terms of pricing, there is no official word from GWM, although we have a pretty good feeling that this car will be parked underneath that of the Haval H6 HEV. As a result, this is positioned to be the most affordable GWM product currently available within the lineup, and should position itself pretty well in terms of value proposition for those looking for a hybrid crossover that doesn't compromise in terms of efficiency nor in terms of overall performance. Let us know what you think about the Ora 5 in the comment section below. Do you think that this is GWM's new home run winner, taking a new slice of the pie after having already won a bunch of critical acclaim for the GWM G9 as well as the Haval H6 HEV? Let us know in the comment section below. In any case, that concludes our media preview of the new GWM Ora 5 HEV. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, hit the little bell icon to be notified every time we make a new upload. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. All the links are in the description below, including the link to join our new WhatsApp channel to stay up to date with the very latest developments in the Malaysian automotive industry. Thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you in the next one. Take care and stay safe.